Our speaker, very happy to introduce this gentleman, Henry Hal Johnson, President and CEO of the Upstate South Carolina Alliance. Again, it's an area that has had significant success over the years, and to just hear his perspective will be very informative, and I'm looking forward to hearing his talk. Prior to his appointment as the CEO of the Upstate Alliance, he served nearly 6 years as Executive Director of Orangeburg County Economic Development Commission, and 3 years with South Carolina Department of Commerce as a project manager on the national sales team, and a lot of other stuff that he has done through the years. Please welcome Mr. Hal Johnson.
So here's what we're going to talk a little bit about. Now, I'm going to walk around if it's okay. So can everybody hear me? Okay. So this is what we're going to talk about. When I talk about competitive, I want you to think about diversification. I want you to think about change, because you can never be competitive unless you're willing to take a real hard look in the mirror every day. Okay? I mean, think about that for a second. You've got to take a look at yourselves. And everybody puts their pants on the same way. You may sit on the bed to do it, but you still put on your pants just like everybody else does in the world. So let's take a look at what makes us competitive. Let's understand the changing economy. So I'm going to go into a little economic spiel. We're going to know and organize our community. We're going to talk about site selection factors, and then we're going to go in and really talk about thinking regionally and why is that important. So, but before we do that, you got to get up early in the morning, and you got to think faster. You got to be the first one there. You got to be willing to dream and work hard to attack what you want done. The other thing is you got to be faster than anybody else out there. Challenge is a lot of times we can get complacent in where we are. We think about all the successes that we have. You guys have an economic engine here that by far no one in the Southeast can deal with other than maybe Orlando. So when you think about the economic engine, you've got to challenge yourself how you're going to take that to the next step. So let's think about, first of all, what's affected what we do every day. And this certainly has an effect on tourism. But when you think about the earthquake in Japan and how that globally affected all of us, and take one plant in Japan, one plant that made about 72% of all chips that went into automobiles. It literally almost shut down Toyota, almost shut down Honda, almost shut down Mitsubishi, and even BMW. I can tell you that all the suppliers that used chips in the upstate were in their back room saying, what do we do? And it was a real serious issue, okay? But that's not just it. The other side, what about the euro? What's happening in Europe right now, and how is that going to affect us? Well, you know, right now, if you think about the value of the dollar to the euro, or the dollar to the pound, or the dollar to the renminbi in China, or to the yen, or to any other currency that's out there, think about those people who come here to spend money and play golf. Think about those people who come here as their destination, right? And the fact is, those who have a currency that's valued more than ours, they come here and just eat it up. They enjoy it. Now let's also thinking about the emerging markets. We talked a little bit earlier this morning about the resurgence of manufacturing. And why is that happening? Well, you've got the middle class in China has gone from 25 cents an hour to just under $5 an hour. Their electricity prices are 4 times more expensive than ours. And then you have rising fuel costs, which makes it more expensive for goods to be shipped back. But folks, we aren't going to see the same type of manufacturing that left the U.S. come back. We have 4 Chinese textile companies that I'm working with right now. 4. And they range from 100 million to 450 million. And the biggest one has 125 employees. Not 1,000, not 500. So if you land a 1,000-person company, you better be backing up all over yourself to bring that bad boy home, because there aren't many of those left. All right, so what about the recovery? We're seeing a recovery, and each area sees it a little bit differently. But when you think about the way Horry County sees it, and you think about the way Georgetown sees it, you're right here next to each other, but yet it's still vastly different. Okay? When we look at it in the upstate and we look at it from our rural communities to our urban communities, it's still vastly different. but it all depends on how we handle it. I want you to take a look at this top 25 list in 1982, 30 years ago, and look at the companies that were 1 through 25, this Fortune 500 list. Amazingly, a lot of these companies don't even exist today. Here's a list today. How about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac making this list? Huh? What about that? Really? Apple for the first time made the list this year. It's amazing. They're surging. iPod and iPad sales have put them on the list. Costco made the list for the first time this year. Look at Walmart. We were talking about Walmart earlier. You know why Walmart's up at the top? And they kind of go back and forth from number 1 to number 2. The reason is because when you buy a product, it's scanned 10 days later, that product's back on the shelf, and they don't pay anybody for 90 days. So the product turns over 9 times, and their carrying costs, they're carrying the money. OPM. They're making money off your money. So let's take a look at the breakdown. Think about where we were in 1982 and look at the diversification of our U.S. top 25 Fortune 500 companies and look at them today. Pretty amazing, isn't it? So you don't have to just have manufacturing to be successful. You've got to have a good diversification of all types of businesses to be successful. And if you take a look at your economy here in Myrtle Beach, Horry County, in the NISA region, and you think about how you diversify, it's okay to have pockets of excellence. It's how you build on those pockets of excellence together. Okay? So, change. Is it the jingly stuff you got in your pocket, or is it you looking in the mirror saying, you know what, we're going to do things a little bit different today? Okay, because we have to really take a look. And this is hard. See, I get to go home today, so I can say some things that others can't. But we really have to take a look at what are we saying to outside communities about the way we handle things? What are we saying in the media? What are we saying if we juggle things politically in public? What are we saying if we're constantly leveraging blogs in a negative sense? And I can promise you, whether you want to accept it or not, those companies that are looking at your area, they're reading it. They know it. And if I can make my community look a little bit better because we're not so negative, or we're more positive, or we can add something else, not saying that anybody's negative, but just think about that. We had a real significant issue inside one of our counties where the radio stations, the blogs, the newspaper, everybody was negative. And they wanted to know why they weren't winning any deals. And we had to have a real talk. I said, well, what do you think people think about you? Because here's where it's showing up. All we had to do was Google it. Pretty amazing. So change is important. And I'm sorry if you guys can't see this, but there's a lot of blue dots on this screen up here. And the purpose of this is to show you where manufacturing is resurging. How about that? LA. How about that? What you can't see is right up here, you have all 3 MSAs in the upstate, Greenville, Spartanburg, and Anderson. Yes, we have 3, and it's very unfortunate. But we've got 3 MSAs up here. All 3 of them made this list. And it's showing significant growth in manufacturing, but diverse. And the manufacturing that we're seeing is against 5 different industry sectors versus 1, and that was textiles. Okay? But we still have 80,000 jobs in textiles. They're all just paying $32,000 to $40,000 a year now. Much more advanced, but just less jobs. So how about this list? Check out South Carolina and this one. Check out the Southeast. This talks about annual population change rates from 2001 to 2010. If you look at Horry County's population, I believe it's 281,000, 285,000 for Horry County. Do you know the predictions for Horry County's growth by 2042 is to be 531,000? Are y'all ready for that? You got the roads and the water and the sewer, the broadband. You got enough real estate, but are you ready for that kind of growth? I mean, seriously. And that's something that you have to think about. In the upstate, we're watching that the growth rate inside our community is going to go from 1.4 million to 1.8 million. Another 400,000 people coming into the upstate region. And when you really break down cost of everything, roads, water, sewers, schools, hospitals, it's $15 billion worth of infrastructure that we've got to create. We're asking ourselves, are we ready for that? Can we handle it? Because it's important. We got to think about that type of thing now. And it's not a political tug of war. It's going to happen whether we want it to or not. Because we created an incredible place that people want to come to. Look at where you grew from 95,000 people to over 330,000 people with Horry and Georgetown County combined. Think about that growth. Significant. So what happens when everyone else decides they want to move there? Interestingly enough, look where you're seeing all the declines. Okay, you're seeing declining population in the Rust Belt areas. Up in here, I can promise you, I've got 4 different members on my business development team, and we're up there every other month knocking on doors. So how about this? How many know what STEM means? STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Okay? When you think about the lowest unemployment rates in 2011, I'm sorry for those of y'all who can't see on the back row. Interestingly enough, budget analysis shows the lowest. Okay? Occupational therapists, computer network architects, your technology that you were talking about. How about veterinarians? Man, we love our pets. Veterinarians are higher than doctors or surgeons or nursing assistants. Okay? But when you think about this list, almost 50+% of this list requires STEM education. 50%. So what are your primary and secondary education centers working on? Are they preparing the workforce for the future? Are they truly understanding who their largest provider of revenue is? Do you know that I met with Greenville County School System and Spartanburg County's largest school district, and I asked their superintendents, who is your largest single funder? Do you know they didn't know? Superintendent School District 6 in Spartanburg County didn't know that BMW was his largest single provider. Because, you know, the law changed. None of us pay for our kids to go to school anymore unless you got a couple cars and a couple rental properties. But your primary residence does not pay for your kid to go to school. I feel guilty about that as a father of 2. So we got to understand, we got to be prepared. We got to prepare our workforce, and we got to invest in that workforce. We have to invest in that workforce. So this comes from the South Carolina Department of Employment Workforce in South Carolina. Here in our state, check out this list. Anybody up for a medical job? Want to talk about diversifying? Can you tell me what the average age of the citizen in Horry County is? Well, I mean, let's be blunt. What is the average age of Horry County Council? What is the average age of City Council? What is the average age of the Board of Trustees of this university? If you think about the average age of your community, healthcare is going to be important. Are we prepared for that? Are we providing the right types of education in primary and secondary education to prepare someone to be in the medical field? Because we're going to need it. So there's a lot of things going on out there. We just talked about the economy booming. Well, the economy is booming. You saw your revenue numbers coming in. Yeah, there's a slight decline, but my gosh, it's unbelievable. State's doing pretty doggone good compared to the nation. Not only did we balance our budget in South Carolina, but we had a surplus, right? And it looks like we'll have the same again this year. So there's other things out there that we need to be worried about, and the local level is really getting hit hard because of all the cost that we're doing. And it's great. I'm a big believer in not raising taxes. But if you don't generate additional revenue, you got to keep paying for your overhead. All y'all balance your own checkbook, and the political stance doesn't always need to be we're not going to pay taxes when we know we got to have additional infrastructure. Because I just told you in the upstate alone, we've got to have $15 billion worth of new infrastructure. Where's that going to come from? It's got to get paid for. So we have to look at this as an investment in ourselves. This is change. This is change, real change. And we talk about all these other things, but let me keep on going. How about this? Look at the difference between large business and small business. Kauffman Foundation did a poll of the Fortune 500 and said, what's the most important impediment growth of your business? They say finding qualified people. Well, look what the National Federation of Independent Businesses says for small business. That ranked 5%. Small businesses are more concerned about sluggish economy, regulatory uncertainty, and taxes. Isn't that interesting? A lot of small businesses become big businesses, and the small businesses that become big businesses start thinking this way. People make business happen. We got to quit worrying about these other things and get out there and make our business successful. We're thinking about the wrong things. That's why you have so many failures in small business, because you're looking down the wrong path. So paradigm shifts. First of all, there's less big fish out there. And what does that mean? We can call them buffaloes, you can call them big fish, you can call them whatever you want. But interestingly enough, I was talking to Mike Randall, who's the editor of Southern Business Development Magazine. He says, you know, South Carolina has had an incredible year this year, but North Carolina is going to score higher than you guys because they had more projects than you did. Now think about that a second. I don't know about you guys, and I love having a big win. I mean, nothing is greater press than when you get to announce the big one. But the fact is that big one can go away as quickly as it came. Business conditions can change, and all of a sudden there's a big hole in your economy, and it's a whole lot easier to work with multiple firms. So when you think about the big fish, you sure better do what all you can to take care of it once it gets here. All right? You know, when we talk about 80% of the job growth is happening with existing companies, my wife told me when we first met, honey, if you would learn to maintain what you've obtained, you would be the wealthiest man in the world. And you think about that real quickly and put it in perspective of economic development. If we can take care of the companies that are already in our backyard, we got to go visit them in the foreign countries from which they hail. We can't just sit here and think those companies are great and they'll always be here, because you know what? Somebody like me's in their back door saying, we sure wish you'd come to our community. Think about that. That's why you afford Brad a budget and you give him the authority to go out and do that. That's why you invest in NISA and you ask them to go and travel abroad for you so that you can go thank them, because you can't do it. As a county council person or a mayor or whatever the political position may be, it's difficult for you to travel because our press today wants to make it such a big deal of you spending taxpayer dollars. The fact of it is you're maintaining what you've obtained. And never, never be shy about that. So, know your strengths. That, my friend, is one hell of a strength. We just had a conference of about 400 of our peers from the Southern Economic Development Council. Brad was a great host. Jeff was a great host with NISA. We worked for over a year to bring these folks down, and it was pretty amazing to me how many people came in early and how many people stayed late, and they used it as part of their family vacation. Pretty doggone incredible. And we got some of the highest ratings that we've had on any of our surveys from any location. Myrtle Beach isn't the same place that all of them remember. It's changed a lot. It's changed a lot from the days that I used to spend my summers at Lakewood Campground. I remember. It's changed a lot. So let's talk about steps to success. How many of you, there's a couple of people have housing projects going on right now in the audience, but how many of y'all have ever built a house from the chimney down? It doesn't happen, right? I mean, the reality is you always start with the foundation. So we're going to talk about the foundation, infrastructure, leadership, and attitude. And really, if you think about the 4 core issues that a community has to work on to diversify itself, to strengthen itself, to make it more competitive, these are the 4 things. And it ain't rocket science. Sometimes we got to leave egos on the line, but others, we just got to make sure that we pay attention to the list. Because if you don't, there are other communities that are. And you need to pay attention to that. If you don't, there's someone else out there that wants to eat your lunch. They want to take your employers, and they're going to compete with you for the same projects that you're competing with. And if you think that God's given you everything on earth to be successful, just know He's given everybody else on earth the same assets. You are in competition with the world. Have the right foundations in place. So, let's think regionally. The upstate of South Carolina, that little dark green area is the 10 counties in which I represent. We're not between Atlanta and Charlotte. We connect them. Don't forget it. The reality is the upstate region has just under 1.4 million people. We're one of the highest concentrated areas of manufacturing anywhere in the U.S. We have more foreign direct capital investment than anywhere in the U.S. on a per capita basis. We're truly a diversified community. But the reality is that when we go out and sell the upstate, we're selling Charlotte and Atlanta too. Because let me tell you a hard lesson learned. I'm sitting in China. One of the smallest cities that I went to is 4.3 million people. Same population in our state. And I'm starting talking about the population of the upstate being 1.4 million people and realized how small we were. And I said within a 150-mile radius, which was the same size as their town or their geography, we had 15 million people. Well, now we compete with Shanghai, Tokyo, and others. So if you think that your 287,000 in population can compete with Shanghai, you might want to grab Georgetown, Florence, Marion, and everything else around you to get you up to the million point. That's reality. That's why we see the upstate in an area, because it's not just us, it's everybody else we can pull into the pie too. The other piece of this is that when I see a project, they've already left Atlanta or Charlotte. Okay? They're looking at them too. They're not just coming here. We might be on a short list. And when a project comes to see you today, you're already on a short list. Okay? They've already figured it out because of the internet and websites and everything else. Reality is, this is the way a company sees you. You see that little orange dot right there? That's the upstate. We'll call that Myrtle Beach. All right? Fact is, we're a dot on the map. Reality is, how are we the last dot standing? What are you doing inside your group? Whether you're a council member, whether you're an economic development board member, whether you're an educator. And remember, you might be a little upset with the way I'm handling this, but this is reality. How are you the last dot standing? How are you going to compete with Rio? How are you going to compete with Shanghai? How are you going to compete with Tokyo? And you are on every project. We're in a global economy. So here's another way to look at it. If you take a look at the MSAs in the upstate and you start thinking about how they are or how they stand in their rankings, these are U.S. metro rankings over here. So Greenville by itself, Greenville, Malden, Easley is third in the state. Spartanburg's fourth. Here's Myrtle Beach. There's Florence, Anderson. So when you take all three of our MSAs together, we become the 41st MSA in the U.S. We can compete in the top 40, right? It's important that we look at it that way. So what's it take to get there? Well, we got to invest in this stuff. And believe me, those of us in the upstate really do want y'all to get I-73. And the reason is because if you're more healthy, if you've got better access, then we as a state benefit. Reality is South Carolina is still a very small state. You know, I grew up in Hilton Head, and I remember going across on a 2-lane bridge. Now there's a nice 4-lane bridge that goes across it. Right? Look at all the bridges that you have coming into Myrtle Beach. Remember how backed up it used to be getting in here. Right? There's a lot of infrastructure that must be developed. But we can't just dwell on that alone. We've got to look at broadband. We've got to look at ports. We've got to look at expanding airports. All of that is infrastructure cost that we must look at. What about schools, medical facilities? And this is just as important, if not more, the human infrastructure. This is our workforce. These are our children. You want to make your community the best community in the world, the most diversified community in the world, you figure out how to make your children marketable. That's just point blank. Our children are our future resources. How do we take them from the classroom to the boardroom? How do we put them in those positions in which they can compete with anybody out there? How many kids that graduated from our public schools or any of our schools in the local area are sitting in boardrooms right now? Do we know? Are we leveraging them as a resource? This gentleman is one of the most prominent site location consultants in the U.S., Mike Mullis. And I want you to read this, and I'm going to read it word for word. One key item to successful marketing is the formulation of a knowledgeable and dedicated business and political leadership group to assist the economic development professionals in closing any qualified and desired deal. That's a pretty bold statement when you think about that. Let's take it and break it down a few minutes, okay? First of all, do you notice that business is in front of political? Because business should drive everything. The political side should do what it can to support business and make business healthy, not hinder it, okay? What about economic development professionals? You got a pretty incredible quarterback sitting in this community now, backed by an incredible regional organization, backed by a state that's on fire and wants to win economic development. Have you given them all the tools that they need to be successful? Or do they have to come back to you for every little detail? Do you have a policy guideline in place that allows them to make decisions on the fly? Because if you don't, there's other communities that do, and you've just put up a roadblock for your own team. When I moved to Orangeburg, I left the state. I had the fortune of working projects all over the state of South Carolina. And Lawrence County was probably the most aggressive county anywhere in South Carolina. And the reason is their county council had given their economic developer a policy guideline to put in place that says if you have a company that has this much investment and if they create this many jobs, then we will do X. And if this, then this. If this, then this. It always has to be blessed, finalized by county council, but the reality is this is our policy guideline and we're going to stick to it. If you have to vary from that and get creative to make this work, then come to us. And we'll handle it behind closed doors. We'll make sure that we're talking about what this project will be and how it's going to benefit. And as long as the cost-benefit analysis meets the guidelines that we require, then we will make that deal happen. You want to know why we had such success? Well, we had a lot of things come together. But on top of that, it's because we were working as a solid team. What people saw from us inside, they also saw on the outside, and vice versa. Leadership. Leadership is everything. So how do we build it? How do we coach it? How do we structure it? How do we make leadership work for us? First of all, we've got to make sure that all of our business leaders in the community are singing off the same sheet of music. Whether you're with the largest developer in the county, whether you're with the largest medical facility, whether you're with the technical college, whether you're with Coastal Carolina, whether you're on the Economic Development Board or County Council or City Council, you're all on the same song sheet. Because those communities that are winning, and they're winning often. because there's no doubt in what their capabilities are. And it takes leadership to build that. It's not about an ego. It's about leadership. So let's talk about building your team. In economic development, you got to have a coach and you got to have a quarterback, okay? Your economic developer is your quarterback. Now, if you're going to handcuff your quarterback, there ain't any passing going on, and it's going to be real hard to hand off or pitch the ball, much less take the snap. So take the handcuffs off. Give your quarterback the ability to do things without constant checkup. Because the reality is, at the end of the year, there's an annual review, and either you meet goals or you don't, right? We don't need a weekly checkup. We're professionals. You hired us for that. Let us do our job. Business leaders, you're the coach. You're the liaison between the economic developer and your county councils. It's not that you're going in there with your hand out saying, I need a tax break. It's you're saying, we need to do this together as a community to make ourselves better. Build your team. Leverage each other. Educational resources, state and local governments, real estate professionals. Man, you guys got more real estate professionals down here. I mean, the reach of your real estate arms down here can be pretty significant and global. Because think about the people who buy some of these large resorts. Think about where the funding comes from. They're dealing with resources that are incredible. Now, workforce development representatives, and I know I've left someone out, but the fact is your economic development team is broad, it is deep, but it is all on one song sheet. Build your resources, and we could talk about this all day too. But the fact is, before you can ever do any incentives, this right here needs to be determined. What is our cost-benefit model? Because at the end of the day, no project is worth losing or setting the community backwards, okay? If it costs you, then you have to make a real decision. Are the jobs that important, or is the brand that important? Okay, so if you take a look at a BMW or a Boeing and you say those were really expensive projects to the state, was that brand important? Well, I will tell you that if you think about BMW, and yes, there was a significant amount of incentives offered on the front end of that project, and did the state take a risk? Yeah, probably it did. But the initial commitment of that project was $450 million and 1,000 jobs. Today they've invested $5 billion, and there's 8,800 people directly working for BMW, and there's another 40,000 people in supplying jobs that work for that. So when you think about the economic impact, if there's something that's going to create that tidal wave, then go for it. But make a decision and be willing to take the risk and understand what the consequences are. That's why you do cost-benefit models. That gives you the boundaries that you must draw. Understand your demographics, leverage them, understand what your incentives are, know up front what you can do. How about investing in sites and buildings? Okay? I can tell you right now, I'm looking for developers everywhere who will come in and build incubator space. I can't find any in our area. I mean, we've got to have incubator space. So now we're trying to get creative with empty office space and how do we leverage that. The fact is that everyone has their challenges. You just have to go and find a way to diversify them. So existing business information. This right here is probably the biggest key to economic development, and it always gets used last. It's the attitude of the community. I'll tell you a quick story, and I don't know how I'm doing on time here. Okay. When I was in Orangeburg, we had a project, and this was probably the greatest learning experience of my life. We had worked our tails off. I mean, we had worked so hard, and it came down between us and Camden. And this project was going to bring in 1,500 jobs. It was going to be 1.5 million square foot. The jobs were going to pay about $15 an hour. And we had an incredible site. Our incentive package was dead on. I mean, it was just right there. All the guy had to do was make a decision between one community and the other. And he and his wife came in on a Saturday with no escort. They brought their kids in, and they enjoyed Orangeburg. Matter of fact, I got a call. He goes, man, what a great place. We saw and enjoyed, and we could make this home. And the next weekend, they went to Camden, and they spent the weekend there. And I called him and asked him, I said, how was your weekend there? He goes, man, what a great town. My family and I can make that home. He goes, I just don't know what we're gonna do to pull the trigger. So he went and called a meeting of the store managers that happened to be in the Columbia area and said, I got a choice of 2 areas to go to, Orangeburg or Camden. If you had the choice of living and putting a facility of 1,500 people, where would you go? And both of them said, for God's sake, we'd go to Camden. Now, none of them lived in Orangeburg. None of them knew anything about Orangeburg. None of them had ever experienced the quality of life there. And when he came back and told me that, I said, you gotta be kidding me. And it's something we'd been working on for a long time because we realized that the attitude of the community was awful. We realized that all the people that had these big houses were driving these great, nice cars, had beach houses in Edisto and Litchfield and everywhere else. They were leaving on the weekends and going everywhere, and they were telling everybody how bad Orangeburg sucked. Well, everybody in the state believed it, including 2 people who were able to influence the decision maker of a company. And I asked that guy when he made his decision to go to Camden, will you come in and talk to my leadership team? Because, you know, I'm a paid suit here, and they don't believe me. I want you to come in. We had the chair of county council. We had our mayor. We had the vice chair. We had the chair of my board. And we had one of our business leaders sitting at the table. And this guy told us the thought process, and we all cried like babies. Every one of us. Because we knew we could have prevented it had we started working on our community's attitude a whole lot earlier. And the fact is Orangeburg's got a lot of great things to offer. The decision I had to make to leave to go to the Upstate was the hardest decision I ever had to make in my life. And the fact is, I'd move back there today because the quality of life there is unbelievable. So it's perception can be everything. Attitude is everything. The reality is, how many projects have you lost because of the perception that your leadership creates? That's the question you got to ask yourself. Okay? Because it can be a challenging place. We don't know why. Whether it's political tug of wars, whether it's personal egos, whether it's one development firm versus the other. No one knows why. Well, I guess we all do. We're just not willing to have enough guts to say anything about it. And until you experience something like that, the loss, you can never grow. You can never grow. The greatest growth experience of my life was losing Target Corporation to Camden, South Carolina. But I will tell you, the greatest growth happened in Orangeburg after that. We sat down in a chamber meeting and we asked the question, what are we going to do to prevent this from happening? And I got up and somebody was hem-hawing about it, and I said, hem-hawing's done. We lost because you leave here, you go and tell people how bad this place is. You're part of the problem. You can fire me right now, but I did my job. I got the company to come. I got the company to come and look. We did this thing together, and we lost it together because we didn't have the right attitude. So we started this little thing called It's a Great Day in Orangeburg County. We started answering our phones, It's a Great Day in Orangeburg County. We had a lot of pushback. You know why we had pushback? Because we had so many damn negative people living there, it was unbelievable. And I can tell you, I kept a chart. I asked my assistant, I want you to take a list of the responses you get from people inside and outside of Orangeburg County when you answer the phone. 95% of the people from Orangeburg County responded, is it? And 95.9% of the people outside of Orangeburg County says, you know it is, isn't it? Isn't that amazing? Attitude, it drives everything. It's a choice. So, real quickly, let me run through all this. You know, in order to drive customer base, the only way to get customer base is understand what's already here first. What are your industry sectors or clusters? How many small businesses did you have here that are on the verge of explosion? Tourism, you've got an incredible component there, and we'll talk about that in just a second. How about site selection factors? And I'm not going to spend much time on this, but take a look at the top two. We're all concerned about this. I've got communities in my region that don't have interstate access, and I can tell you 5 communities get eliminated on almost every request if there's not 1 mile to an interstate. Now we can go back and ask the question, will a 4-lane divided highway work? And about 75% of the time it will. But the fact is here's what's driving projects. Okay, that comes out of Area Development Magazine. Quality of life factors. This is all of your responsibility, every one of you. It's not just the government, it's not just the economic development. All of these things, all of you can influence these one way or the other. Here's why companies relocate. This is when you hear about a company moving from one area to the other, number one decision is high taxes. Look at this one. Excessive governmental regulations. Hefty entitlement programs. I was listening to the news that the city of Stockton is filing for bankruptcy because of heavy entitlement programs, because of public unions. Labor availability, proximity to suppliers, quality of life concerns. So I'm not going to tell you how to build an existing industry program because this is a whole lesson in itself. But the fact is you have existing industries which are absolutely important to you. How many of you as local leaders have gone in and just said thank you? You don't hesitate to send them a property tax bill. But how many of you gone and said thank you to them? How many of you as local leaders on the development board or part of the university have gone and said thank you to these folks? It'd be amazing. They might sponsor an auditorium. They might sponsor something else because you did. They might get involved and actually want to be a part of the recruitment process. It's the hardest thing in the world to do. In the upstate, we fought between the regional alliance and the local economic developers whether or not it was our job to go in and call on local companies. We fought about it. We fought hard. And finally, after 3 consultants come in and saying, look, you can't ever go out and market it without existing industry. You've got to go in and call on them. Today, our regional alliance calls on all the foreign direct companies when we're overseas and tells them thank you. Ask them how we can help them expand. How can we help you with the local leadership? And we also want them to be very honest if something's not happening inside the community that we need to know about, so we can take that message back. So here's NISA's strategic industries. When you talk about the target industries that are out there, ours are a little bit different, but there's a lot of overlap inside South Carolina. There's a tremendous number of these industry sectors that will be significant for the Myrtle Beach area and Horry County. The question is which areas does your county need to focus on and how do they overlap with this? Because there's got to be a good symbiotic marriage in how you make recruitment happen. And it's not that one group is doing something different than you guys are, it's how do you make the overlap work, right? It's not us or them, it's we, okay? How about on the small business side from incubators? How many small business incubators do you have out there? How many of them are full? How many of them are actually working? How many retired CEOs do you have in the area that you could create as a mentoring program? What about entrepreneurial centers connected to the universities and the technical colleges? You probably have this infrastructure, but the question is, when one's filled up, are you already thinking about investing in the next one? Because typically we let something fill up and then we want to rehash and hash and rehash again, and then 5 years have gone by and we haven't done anything. So, tourism. I don't have to talk to you guys about this. You guys are experts. We in the upstate would love to take lessons from you on tourism because we've never really leveraged this up until recently as part of our economic strategy. And boy, have we missed out. But have you been to downtown Greenville lately? Pretty doggone good tourist destination. And not only that, when you're sitting in a restaurant, you're probably going to hear anywhere to 3 to 5 languages in any one dinner experience. It's a global destination. How about cultural and historical? When you think about diversifying the tourism of the area, have you really looked into that? Charleston's really focused on the historical side. What about the rest of us? Georgetown's done a really good job of it. There's opportunities always in our core strengths that we can diversify. So when we talk about building strategies, the strategy of diversification has a lot of implication because each of us have our own opinion about what diversification is. We were even talking about that earlier today, and what does diversifying mean? Well, you make up your own mind what that means because this is your community. But then make sure you put together all the steps in place to make sure it happens. Do you have a marketing plan? I'll give you an example. CUI card. Clemson University has invested in an incredible asset. If you haven't been to see it, it's unbelievable. In less than 9 years, there's over $250 million invested in an automotive research center that is second to none in our country. It's unbelievable. Do you know how much their budget is for marketing? Do you know what their mission statement is? They want to be best in the world in automotive engineering research. 0. You can't be best in the world if you can't go tell anybody about it. Okay? So resources. Allocate resources. You guys have done a good job at allocating a budget for your economic development director. You've done a good job by investing in NISA. Continue to invest in those assets that can go put you on the map. Don't depend on what's been your core to put you on the map, because a lot of times those don't even cross. Okay? If you want to reach the CEO or the C-suite, you may need to go into a different door than the way you are going in. Okay? Work on the deal. And we'll talk about deal in a second. Messaging. Messaging is important. We talked about messaging over and over and over again. There's 2 parts of that. It's how we see ourselves, but more importantly, how others see us. Okay? Because we don't think all the time that that attitude I was talking about in Orangeburg hurts us. But I can promise you it does. I've lived it. All right. We'll run through this real quick. Working a deal, most important. Brad, at some point in time, is going to need you guys to participate in working a deal. A lot of this happens ahead of time before you come to the table. But it all starts with understanding your boundaries, okay? And a good economic developer is a salesperson, but the best salespeople don't talk, they listen. Right? Also, the best salespeople rehearse. And this helps because you never know who you're going to put in front of a prospect that may end up being a problem. Ask for the business and do what you say you're going to do. Now, how many times have y'all heard someone say one or both of these? And it's, we have always done it that way. Those are people who don't like change. Okay? Or we tried that once before. Those are people who don't want to embrace change. Okay? The fact is, if you fail or fall off the bike once in your life and you never get back on, then you'll never ride a bike. Okay? Same difference with economic development. So, before you can ever do economic development, you've got to do community development. You got to know who you are. You got to know what your markets are. You got to organize your community. You got to know your customers. You got to build success strategies. You got to measure, set a benchmark, and then go into retention and cultivation, and last, the recruitment side. Recruitment is absolute last. You know, when you think about sums greater than your part, and you think about the size of your community just as your county's population and communities that you're competing with, just like my scenario of the upstate, along with Atlanta and Charlotte, equals the population of Shanghai, that's the parts, you know, the sum is always greater than the parts. So you think about how you can leverage yourself and position yourself as a region. You need Florence. You need Georgetown. You need the others. And quite honestly, they need you. But don't ever think that you're bigger than they are. You are the 800-pound gorilla. It's okay to understand that, but don't flash it in the regional set, because you have to be a team. At some point, you're going to need the other. And if you're always pushing them around, it won't happen. I can tell you we battle that all the time with Greenville versus Spartanburg, or Greenville versus Anderson, or the rest of the upstate versus Greenville. Okay? If you ever hear somebody say, I won that project, I brought it to the table. I have met 325 people who said they brought BMW to South Carolina. I wasn't even in economic development then. I was still working for Milliken at that time. So, no solo acts. Doesn't matter if you're a politician and you're running for re-election. It doesn't matter if you're an economic developer. It doesn't matter if you're the president of the college. It doesn't matter if you're the dean of the business school. It doesn't matter if you're the head of the planning commission. You're all part of one team. And it takes a team to win a deal. Teams win because you're competing with teams. Thank you very much.